What if Rome, the empire that shaped the world, was founded not by heroes, but by a crime the ancient writers tried to bury? What if the story of Romulus and Remus, the wolf-raised twins every schoolchild knows, hides a truth so dark that even the Romans themselves whispered it only in private? A truth suggesting that Rome, the empire of laws, legions, and order, began with a forbidden prophecy, a stolen birthright, and a betrayal that would echo for centuries. Because before the twins ever drank milk from a wolf, before they traced the borders of the Palatine Hill, there was a prediction, a terrifying one. A prophecy that said a child of royal blood would overthrow the king of Alba Longa, the city from which Rome would one day rise. And it was this prophecy, older than the twins themselves, that set into motion a chain of events that would end with one brother standing triumphantly, and the other lying dead in the dirt beside the walls of a city not yet born. But the question is, were Romulus and Remus truly destined to create Rome, or were they only pawns in someone else's game? The story begins long before their birth, inside the royal halls of King Amulius, a ruler who lived in constant fear of losing his throne. His brother, the rightful king, Numitor, had been cast aside, and Amulius knew that as long as Numitor's bloodline continued, the threat of rebellion lived with it. So he made a decision. He would not kill his niece, Rhea Silvia, Numitor's daughter. No, death was too quick. Instead, he would condemn her to a life where she could never bear children. He forced her into the priesthood of Vesta, the goddess of the hearth, a role bound by one rule stronger than iron. A Vestal virgin must never break her vow of chastity. But the prophecy returned, whispered, feared, unavoidable. And the moment Amulius heard it, his heart froze. It said that Rhea Silvia would become the mother of twin sons, and those sons would destroy him. Impossible, he thought. She is a Vestal. She cannot have children. Yet fate mocks kings. One night, Rhea Silvia vanished from the temple. When she returned, she carried a story no one dared refute. She had been visited by Mars, god of war himself, and the god had made her pregnant with divine children. Whether this was truth, fear, or pure desperation, no one knows. What we do know is this. When the twins were born, Amulius ordered them killed. 2 babies, only hours old. 2 infants whose only crime was existing. But the man ordered to murder them could not do it. Instead, he placed the newborns in a wooden trough and pushed it gently into the Tiber River, praying the waters would guide them to safety. The river was swollen, violent, and merciless. Yet somehow the trough did not sink. It drifted, slowly, toward the wild lands at the foot of the Palatine Hill, the future heart of Rome. There, beneath a fig tree known as the Ficus Ruminalis, the trough came to rest. And then came the moment the Romans never forgot. A moment so strange, so impossible, that even ancient historians struggled to explain it. A she-wolf, ravenous and powerful, approached the crying infants. She did not kill them. She did not harm them. She nursed them. 2 human babies suckling beneath a wolf, an image that would define Roman identity for millennia. But that is the legend. The truth may be very different. Because some ancient writers claimed the she-wolf wasn't a wolf at all. They whispered that the word lupa also meant something else, a prostitute. Was Rome founded by a wolf? Or by a woman the early Romans refused to acknowledge? What matters is this: the twins survived. And soon, the man who became their protector, Faustulus, a humble shepherd, would find them and raise them as his own sons, unaware that one day, these boys would return to the city that tried to kill them, unaware that one day, they would challenge a king, unaware that one day, one brother would die by the other's hand. The real question is not how Romulus killed Remus. The real question is why. And that answer begins with the truth Faustulus hid from them, for as long as he could. The twins grew into young men with a strength that startled even the seasoned shepherds of the Tiber Valley. Romulus was fierce, calculating, and driven by an inner fire that always seemed to burn just a little hotter than everyone else's. Remus, on the other hand, possessed a natural charisma, an ease with people that made others follow him almost without realizing it. But what united them was something neither of them could explain. A restlessness, an instinct that whispered that they were meant for more than hunting, herding, and racing across the countryside. They didn't know it yet, but the blood of Numitor and perhaps even Mars pulsed in their veins. Still, no prophecy stays buried forever. The truth began to unravel on an otherwise ordinary day, a festival, a drunken scuffle, and a boundary dispute between shepherd groups. A fight broke out. Remus, brash and fearless, stepped forward to defend his people. But the conflict spiraled out of control. By the end of the chaos, Remus had been captured by the authorities of Alba Longa. Romulus, refusing to abandon him, marched straight toward the city, but he wasn't alone. The shepherds, emboldened by the brothers' leadership, followed him. They didn't yet know the history buried beneath the city's polished stones. They didn't know that Remus had been taken into the hands of the king who had once ordered his death. But Faustulus, watching the two young men walk toward danger, knew exactly what was coming. For years he had protected them. For years he'd kept the truth in silence. But destiny does not wait for cowards or shepherds. It forces itself into the open. He went to them, breathless, trembling, unable to keep the secret any longer. And there, near the edge of the city, Faustulus finally revealed everything. How the twins were found in a wooden trough. How Rhea Silvia, their mother, had been condemned by King Amulius. How the king himself had ordered their deaths. How the prophecy said 2 children would rise to destroy the tyrant. Romulus clenched his fists. Remus went pale. But one sentence from Faustulus changed everything. You are sons of royalty, not shepherds. At that moment, their destinies split. Not from each other, but from the lives they had known. Romulus felt a surge of justice, purpose, almost hunger. Remus felt betrayal, not toward Amulius, but toward the world that had stolen their birthright. Together, the brothers stormed into Alba Longa with the fury of a storm no shepherd could contain. And when the people saw them, tall, confident, commanding, whispers spread like wildfire. They looked familiar. Their features resembled those of Numitor, the rightful king. The city stirred with curiosity, and then with hope. In a dramatic confrontation in the king's court, Remus was freed. Romulus stood boldly before Amulius. The people of Alba Longa, long oppressed, surged behind them. What followed was swift, chaotic, and unstoppable. The king fell. Some accounts say Remus struck the blow. Others claim Romulus delivered justice. A few, more cynical ancient writers, suggested the brothers let the crowd do it, a convenient absolution. But one fact is consistent across every source. Amulius died in fear, the same fear that had driven him to kill infants. Order broke down. The palace trembled with newfound freedom. And in the middle of it all, the old man Numitor was brought forward. When he saw the twins, his eyes filled with a mixture of shock and recognition. He embraced them. And the people, witnessing the prophecy fulfilled, hailed Numitor as king once more. With their grandfather restored to power, Romulus and Remus were offered high positions in Alba Longa. Comfortable lives. Influence. Safety. They refused. Something called to them, a desire to build something of their own. A city. A legacy. A future. So they left Alba Longa with followers who believed in them, shepherds, wanderers, displaced men yearning for a new beginning. Their destination? The wild lands near the Tiber, where they had been found as infants. There, between the Palatine and Aventine hills, the twins stood side by side and declared, "We will build our own city." But ambition is a seed that grows differently in every heart. And for the first time, a shadow slipped quietly between the brothers. Because one question hung over everything. Who would rule this new city? A question that would soon lead to betrayal, bloodshed, and the darkest truth behind Rome's creation. A truth ancient historians recorded with trembling hands. As Romulus and Remus drew the first lines of their future, neither realized the ground beneath them had already chosen which brother it would accept and which one it would reject. The winds that blew across the Palatine hill carried the scent of damp soil and new beginnings. When Romulus and Remus returned to the place of their salvation, They were not the helpless infants once abandoned by the river. They were leaders now, surrounded by men willing to follow them anywhere. But even as the brothers stood shoulder to shoulder, their unity was already fracturing. Ambition, that ancient Roman fire, had awakened. The land was fertile. The hills were defensible. The river was rich with trade. This, everyone knew, could become a city more powerful than Alba Longa, more influential than any settlement in Latium. But only one man could lead it. It began with a simple question, a question that should have brought clarity but instead ignited the first spark of rivalry. Who has the right to rule? Some pointed to Remus, the one with natural charm, the one who had endured captivity without losing spirit. Others whispered that Romulus, disciplined and fierce, carried the true authority of a founder. Each brother heard these voices, and each felt the pressure building inside him. To settle the dispute, they turned to the ancient practice of augury, reading the will of the gods through the flight of birds. Romulus climbed the Palatine Hill. Remus climbed the Aventine Hill. Both prayed to the gods to reveal the rightful king. What happened next depends on which ancient author you believe. Some say Remus saw 6 vultures first. Others say Romulus saw 12. Still others whisper that both saw omens, but interpreted them in their own favor. Either way, the argument that followed split the followers into 2 camps. Voices rose. Pride flared. And the brothers, once united against a tyrant, now stared at each other with suspicion burning in their eyes. The augury had not solved anything. It had only deepened the divide. Then came the moment that changed everything. Romulus, determined to prove his authority, began marking the boundaries of his city. He took a plow, drawn by a white ox and a white cow, and traced a sacred furrow, the pomerium, around the Palatine Hill. It was a ritual older than memory, a ceremony that defined not just territory, but destiny. No one was allowed to cross the line. To violate it was to violate the gods. But Remus watched with growing anger, or perhaps amusement. Ancient sources differ. Some say he mocked the wall Romulus was trying to build. Others say he accused Romulus of arrogance, of claiming divine approval he had not earned. Then, suddenly, Remus leaped. He jumped over the half-formed wall, a gesture filled with either taunting laughter or outright challenge. A silence fell over everyone. The meaning was clear. If Remus could cross the boundary so easily, how could the city ever stand against real enemies? Romulus froze. His eyes darkened. What happened next is one of the most debated events in Roman history. Some say Romulus, furious and humiliated, struck his brother then and there, killing him in a moment of rage. Others claim one of Romulus's companions, perhaps Celer, a shadowy figure mentioned only once, delivered the fatal blow to defend his leader. A few writers suggest it wasn't a fight at all, but a ritual misstep that ended tragically. But the version whispered most often through Roman streets, the version the Romans themselves carried with a mixture of shame and pride, tells that Romulus spoke only one cold sentence after the body hit the ground. So perish whoever else shall leap over my walls. The birth of Rome came with death. The ground drank Remus's blood. His supporters scattered or surrendered. Romulus stood alone inside the furrow, inside the boundaries of the city he had claimed with violence and divine authority. But even in victory, something shifted inside him. Because building a city is one thing. Building a kingdom is another. And building an empire requires a kind of ruthlessness that few possess without losing their humanity. Was Remus's death fate? A mistake? A sacrifice? Romulus didn't know. But he knew one thing. Rome was his now. Yet what the new king did next revealed a truth the legends rarely admit. A truth that Rome tried to hide beneath marble and myth. Romulus did not mourn his brother. He did not bury him with honor. He did not even speak his name. Instead, he turned toward his followers, men without families, fugitives, exiles, and made a proclamation that shocked them all. We will fill this city with anyone who seeks refuge. Murderers, runaways, outcasts. Rome began as a sanctuary for the unwanted, a bold decision and a dangerous one. Because the city that would one day rule the world was about to become a magnet for ambition, chaos, and bloodshed. And deep beneath the celebration of Rome's founding, a darker question lingered. If Romulus killed his own brother to protect his walls, what else was he willing to do to protect his throne? The days after Remus's death felt strange to the men who followed Romulus. They had expected mourning, a funeral, some acknowledgement that one of the city's founders had been cut down before the first hut was even built. Instead, Romulus acted as though nothing had happened. He moved quickly, decisively, ferociously. He raised the first wooden walls. He laid out streets. He organized the men into companies, assigning roles, ranks, and duties. Rome was being built, not slowly, but in a frenzy, as if the king feared that if he paused for even a moment, Remus's ghost might catch up to him. And perhaps that is exactly what he feared, because rumors began to swirl, whispered at night, traded cautiously in the half-finished streets. Rumors that Remus had appeared to Romulus, not as a brother, but as an accusation. Ancient historian Valerius Antius records a chilling version, that Remus stood before Romulus in a dream and demanded that the injustice be paid with ritual vengeance. Another source, Livy, admits that people spoke of Romulus being haunted, not openly, but quietly, as if the city itself disapproved of its first act as a living place. Whatever the truth, something weighed heavily on the new king. He began to withdraw from his men. He spent hours alone on the Palatine Hill, staring at the ground where Remus had fallen. He spoke little, but when he did, his voice carried a new edge, cold, commanding, unquestionable. Rome had been born in blood, and blood calls for more blood. Yet the young city faced a different kind of crisis, not spiritual, but practical. It had men, plenty of them, fugitives, wanderers, exiles looking for a second life. But it had no women. A city cannot grow without mothers. A kingdom cannot endure without families. Romulus knew this better than anyone. His vision wasn't a camp or a fort. It was a future empire. So he sent envoys to nearby tribes, the Sabines, the Senenenses, the Crustumini, and others, offering alliances sealed with marriage. Every tribe refused. Why would they trust a city built by outlaws? Why give daughters to a king who had killed his own brother? Rejection twisted something inside Romulus. He had been denied by families, kings, and elders, but he refused to let Rome fail. And so he devised a plan that would change history forever. He announced a grand festival to honor Neptune Equester, god of horses and the sea. He invited all the neighboring peoples. Food, games, contests, a spectacle like none the region had seen. The tribes arrived in droves. The Sabines came proudly, bringing their wives and daughters, dressed in their finest clothing. They had no reason to fear, not yet. And then Romulus gave a signal. A sharp cry. A sudden uproar. Men leaping into the crowd. Women screaming. Chaos swallowing celebration. What happened next became one of the darkest foundational stories in Roman memory. The abduction of the Sabine women. It was not an act of lust. It was an act of survival. A violent, strategic seizure meant to ensure Rome's future. The men took the women. The tribes fled home in fury. War was inevitable. But the city grew. Families were created by force. Rome transformed from a camp of outlaws into a population bound together by a strange mixture of violence and necessity. And through it all, Romulus stood at the center, unshakable, uncompromising, unstoppable. Yet one truth became clearer with each passing day. A city founded on the death of a brother and the abduction of daughters could not escape its consequences. War was coming. The Sabines would return. And when they did, the fate of Rome, and of Romulus himself, would be decided. Was Remus's death only the first sacrifice? Or was Rome demanding a second? Because buried beneath these rising conflicts was a secret no Roman child was ever told. A truth about what really happened to Romulus in the end. A truth darker than murder. Darker than betrayal. A truth that would rewrite the meaning of Rome's founding. The war that followed the abduction of the Sabine women became Rome's first great test. A test of leadership, unity, and the still young cities will to survive. At first, the conflicts were scattered. Neighboring tribes attacked in anger, trying to reclaim their daughters. Romulus met every challenge head-on. His followers, hardened by exile and desperation, fought with a ferocity no army expected. But the real threat came from the Sabines themselves, a powerful and disciplined people. When they finally marched on Rome, they came not only with swords, but with a plan. Guided by a cunning commander named Tatius, the Sabines infiltrated the citadel through treachery. A Roman maiden named Tarpeia, bribed with promises of glittering gold, opened a gate from within. What she received instead was crushing death, not treasure. The Sabine soldiers hurled their shields upon her, burying her beneath what she desired most. Her betrayal became a warning etched into Rome's memory. Let no Roman fall to greed. The Sabines flooded into the city. Street by street, they advanced. Romulus rallied his men at the foot of the Palatine, but the Sabines pushed forward with relentless precision. The battle surged like a living beast, neither side willing to surrender. And then, something extraordinary happened. The Sabine women, the same women taken by force, now wives and mothers, rushed between the armies. Some carried infants. Some were pregnant. All were desperate. They cried out not for vengeance, but for peace. They chose Rome, chose the lives they had built, chose unity over endless bloodshed. Their words dissolved the fury from both sides. Their tears forged a treaty stronger than any spear. Rome and the Sabines became one people. Romulus and King Tatius ruled together. And for a while, the city thrived. Order grew. Families multiplied. The chaos of its birth began to fade. But Rome is a city that never allows peace for long. It was built on conflict, shaped by hardship, and destined, always, for more. When King Tatius died under mysterious circumstances, Romulus ruled alone once again. But something had changed inside him. The shepherd boy turned king had become harder, colder, convinced that Rome needed absolute authority to survive. Some whispered he stood too far above the people now, like a god among mortals. Others claimed he stopped seeking counsel and ruled with a severity that frightened even his closest followers. And then, one day, Romulus vanished. The stories of his disappearance are as tangled as the legends of Rome's birth. One version says a violent storm swept over the city. Dark clouds engulfed the sky. Thunder roared. Lightning crashed. And in the chaos, Romulus was lifted into the heavens, taken by his father Mars to join the gods. This was the official story, the comfortable story, the story Rome wanted to believe. But another version, whispered quietly, recorded reluctantly, tells something else. It says the senators murdered him. They met with him on the field of Mars, accusing him of cruelty and tyranny. And while the sky darkened, whether by storm or by their imagination, they surrounded him. They tore him apart. They hid the pieces. They returned to the city with a lie. Romulus has become a god. A cleaner ending. A divine ending. But perhaps not a true one. Some sources say Remus's ghost was seen that night, walking the field where his brother vanished. Not triumphant, not vengeful, but sorrowful. As if Rome itself had repeated its original sin. A city born from brotherly bloodshed, expanded by abduction, stabilized by women who stopped a war, and ruled by a king who may have been killed by his own people. So the question remains, was Romulus the founder Rome needed? Or was he simply the first in a long line of rulers who believed the city was worth any sacrifice, even truth itself? Because in the end, the greatest empire in history may have been built not on destiny, but on a lie that protected its pride. A lie that hid its first murder. A lie that shaped the world. References for description and accuracy. Olivi, Ob Urb Condita, Book 1, Plutarch, Life of Romulus, Dionysius of Halicarnassus, Roman Antiquities, Ovid, Fasti of Valerius Antius, Fragments, Tacitus, Annals, on early Roman traditions.